Hello YouTube, my name's Marie. Today we're going to talk about the first 6 episodes in the currently airing K-drama entitled Navillera. Our two leads are a very unlikely pair. One is a 70-year-old retired mailman who has always dreamed of doing ballet. And for simplicity's sake, for the rest of the video, I will refer to this senior man as the 할아버지 and the other male lead as the male lead. But just know that both are very equal in screen time and story, plot development, all that stuff. They really are the two leads of this show. I will just call one 할아버지 and one male lead. So our male lead is a 23-year-old ballet dancer who is preparing to enter a competition. Also having some financial difficulties. He works a couple different part-time jobs even though he should really be investing all of his time and energy into his craft. Then one day our 할아버지 finds this practice room and he insists on being accepted as a student there. The owner of the practice room and then also the mentor and teacher of our male lead gives in, says, fine, you can be a student here, but I'm not the one that's going to be teaching you. Our male lead will teach you. And in return, the 할아버지 must act as a manager for the male lead. Now, initially, the male lead is not very happy about this. He thinks it's a complete waste of his time to instruct an elderly man beginner basic ballet. But over the course of these 6 episodes, the walls that he has put up to keep a lot of people out, which you'll find out more why if you do watch the show. This is a spoiler-free review. You know, those walls start to come down and they form a really wonderful friendship and partnership. Now there are a lot of other characters beyond our two male leads in this show. Specifically, the 할아버지's immediate family members all play a key role in this show, from his wife, his 3 children and their spouses, and then also his only grandchild. All of them have strong opinions on whether or not our 할아버지 should be doing ballet, both positive and negative. And I found his wife's reaction particularly heartbreaking, and then also that eventual confrontation that happens between the wife, the eldest son, and the 할아버지. That was such a powerful scene. Although the side characters do add some nice plot moments and emotional moments, I think it's a bit crowded. If I were the writer or the director, I think I would cut the 할아버지's daughter and her husband from the story, because again, it's just so crowded. And at this point, at episode 6, who knows what will happen from here because I haven't watched it, but at this point, that child, the daughter and her husband, have no purpose for the plot and really just suck valuable screen time away from our characters in a show that is already quite crowded. It's crowded both with all of the characters and then also all of the themes that this show is really hammering into the audience. There are very few moments of quiet or breathing room for the audience. It's just go, go, go. Probably 90% of the dialogue is in service to hammering home those themes. There were many moments where I did kind of roll my eyes and I was like, I get it, can we move on? I also recognize that this is an unpopular opinion. I've watched several other review videos on this show and they seem to really like the discussion of these themes. And while I do think they're important, I just think there's a lot of telling and not enough showing going on with this show that makes it a little bit preachy. In the same way that I found My ID is a Gangnam Beauty a little bit preachy. Again, with that show too, I thought the conversations and the messages and the themes were all very important, but it was just very heavy-handed. For instance, in the very first episode, it opens with our 할아버지 going to a funeral and talking with some of his buddies that he hasn't seen for a very long time, and the discussion they have about what it means to be a senior in society. Well, that conversation I think was really important, and I do like some of the lines that were said. I think one was, if you're not changing diapers, you're wearing them. I thought that was so good. But overall, I thought the scene was really unnecessary, and it would have been much better to have that time given to showing the audience maybe what an average day in our 할아버지's life looks like, you know, show us the monotony, show us the boredom, show us like the lack of purpose he experiences before he goes and finds ballet, because as it stands right now, we don't get that. We have a lot of events happening quite quickly, and then all of a sudden he's into ballet. And again, the scene is not bad on its own, it's just a lot of telling and not showing. And later on in that episode, we get a very powerful death that basically elaborates on those discussions that they were having already about, you know, like being too old to go after their dreams or their passions and things like that. So I just don't feel like both were necessary. And it just, again, it makes it feel very crowded, very rushed, and that could be partly because this series is only going to be 12 episodes. My experience through this show of being told how to feel all the time instead of being presented with characters and plots and conversations and music that guides me to my feelings is emphasized by the music itself. Oh my gosh, I think it's a mixed bag for one thing. There are moments where I think the music is just absolute perfection, but I would say over 70% of the time, I think the music is too loud. Too loud, it's too in your face, it's too obvious too. You know, like characters are just sitting down having a conversation and say one asks like, what do you enjoy doing? And the other doesn't know how to answer. The music just swells with like this piano that like is a very obvious attempt at making the viewer emotional. And it, again, I just rolled my eyes because I don't need to be spoon-fed how to feel. Like, calm down, less is more. Now, I do want to talk about one more criticism before going on to positives, and I promise I do have positives because I am enjoying this show. And this next con is quite nitpicky on my part because I do have a lot of history with competitive dance, so I was looking at the dancing a little bit more harshly than the average viewer would, and I try not to do that. I do try and allow for inconsistencies or things to be unrealistic because it's entertainment. But one thing really bothered me, and I think it's in the second episode, but regardless, when our Haruboji and our male lead have their first, you know, session together, instead of starting at the bar, which you always start at the bar is home in ballet class. You always warm up at the bar. You start with pliés, always around the world you start with pliés. Instead of, you know, starting there, he like goes straight into like a cold stretch. So like a cold stretch is like you haven't warmed up beforehand. Like, for example, what I would do a lot of the times before I had my actual classes is I would be in the hallway and I would be like jumping up and down, warming up a little bit, getting the blood flow going to the muscles so that when I did eventually stretch, I wouldn't pull anything, I wouldn't be injuring myself. They don't do that here. They just like, he takes this Haruboji who could be stiff, who could, like, he really has no idea like the guy's physical capabilities, and he just goes right into intense full body cold stretching, and it made me so annoyed. I was because everything else about the show to do with dance I think is really wonderful, like almost perfect. Like I couldn't ask for it to be any better, and then you have this one scene with cold stretching and it just didn't make any sense. So moving on to pros, one very small moment that really meant a lot to me as a viewer with a history of dance was, I think it was in the 5th episode. It's when our Haruboji eventually practices on his own, like in the studio. You know, in the first couple episodes, you see him doing this with his fingers. So this is like a technique that we like teach the little ones, like the little ballerinas who start at like 4 years old. We say like, put your thumb to your middle finger and pretend like you're holding a fairy wing, or, you know, like a little tissue paper or something. You see our Haruboji holding his fingers like that when he's moving his arms from like first to second. But then when he's practicing on his own several episodes into the series, you see this technique growth that I loved so much, because you see him go through these positions and his fingers aren't so stiff. It was a very small little detail and I loved it. So another pro is the acting. I think everybody is doing a really fantastic job with the acting, no complaints there. I'm really starting to like this male lead actor. You know, I think I was first introduced to him in Love Alarm, and now I see him here, and I continue to like him. I think I'll seek out more things that he's in. And then also the Haimoni, our Hareboji's wife. She's a great Korean actress. She's like a legend, and I just love to see her. Another huge pro I wanted to highlight for me with this show is all of the secondary plot lines. There's one with our male lead and his father, and kind of the mystery surrounding the events that landed his father in jail, and I'm really enjoying that. I actually really enjoy all the scenes that have to do with that bleach blonde male character. I think they play really well off of each other. And then I also am super curious to learn more about the Hareboji's youngest son. The youngest son was a doctor, I believe, but he quit his job to pursue this documentary, and that earns him a lot of criticisms from his elder brother, who, yeah, I'm just really interested in his story. He gets very minimal screen time at this point, but I hope as we go forward we learn more about him. Like, I'm just really intrigued by this character. So am I gonna keep watching? That's yes. I am, for the most part, really enjoying Navillera. Although this K-drama can be quite heavy-handed with its themes, I do think the themes and discussions are important. They're also interesting. The characters are lovable, and the dancing is really good, and the plot in general. Like, I'm just quite intrigued. We're halfway through the season, and I am going to keep watching more. I think in general, episodes 3, 4, and 6 have been my favorite. So I want to end on a question that can be kind of a light spoiler, so if you don't want to know anything about the series beyond what I've already said, leave now. Thanks for stopping by. You're still here? Okay, this question is really for people who might have more knowledge about Korean culture than I do at this point, so any of my Korean viewers, please help me out with this. I was honestly shocked by the reaction of the Hareboji's family, his wife and his eldest son specifically, about how adamantly they were against him pursuing ballet. Like, they said, you know, it was embarrassing, like it wasn't appropriate, like he shouldn't be doing it. I'm now just really curious about, you know, like senior life in Korea, because I think for me and like the community that I've grown up in, senior life is like the opportunity to explore. Like, there's an assumption that like seniors will take painting classes and they've never painted before, or they'll like try and write a book when they never wrote a book before. Or, you know, like it's the time to be creative. Even when I was taking some kickboxing classes in high school, I remember my instructor mentioned that he had a senior man who just started classes. You know, like, I think for me, thinking of senior life is, you know, the time to be creative and explore things. So I was surprised when they were so adamantly against it. Is that normal? That's my question. Like, is that an accurate representation of, you know, attitudes and the senior culture in Korea? Like, are seniors meant to only go hiking and then like spend most of their time at home? Like, is that more expected? Even with dancing as an example, both the studios that I was involved with had senior classes. Like, one had a senior tap class that performed almost every year in our end year recital, and then the other class had a beginner ballet class that had like ages between 35 and 70 in it. So that whole reaction by the family really intrigued me, and I'd love it for you to explain it more down below. Okay, anyways, that is everything for me. I hope you guys have a good day and a good night. Bye.